I welcome you to the pure world I have forged.
Hello everyone. I hope you're enjoying the most gruesome killer we've had for a very long time, the Creusot. But we're not here to talk about her today. We're going to talk about the November chapter. Oh, I'm sorry. The January chapter. It seems that Behaviour is trying to do another health patch while we are within a health patch. Interesting. So the November chapter has apparently been delayed to January. There's lots of speculation what this license could be. Of course, the most popular one at the minute is Predator, with one killer being presumably the Predator, and then the two survivors. But there's also rumours that it could be a Resident Evil Part 3. I did a video a while ago about what licenses in DBD could get a sequel chapter, and personally I would rather see some of them get a chapter first rather than getting a third Resident Evil one. But Resident Evil is an immensely popular franchise, one that I actually do really like, and a third chapter would absolutely be doable. So that's what we're going to explore today. Of course, rumours are abound for what could be a Part 3 for Resident Evil and Dead by Daylight. The most popular rumour I've seen is Jack Baker returning. Of course, we always take rumours with a pinch of salt, but I thought it'd be interesting to look at the most recent entries in Resident Evil with RE7 and RE Village, and look to see which characters could fit into the survivor and killer roles. So starting with Resident Evil 7, we of course have Ethan Winters, who is the protagonist of both 7 and Village. He would definitely work for a survivor. The only little issue we have here is that he never reveals his face in either game. I don't think he even does in the DLC. So unless Capcom allow him to show his face in Dead by Daylight, that would be kind of strange if he always had to hide his face. Although as a guest appearance in another game, I feel like it wouldn't be a big deal. So that being said, we of course also have his wife Mia Winters, who would fit the survivor role well. I actually think she's a slightly more interesting character. She's a bit more ambiguous. She's, potentially working for the bad guys, so you could maybe create some interesting dynamics there with her in game. I'm not going to go too into perks and stuff because I'm not really the best qualified for that, and there's also already millions of perks. But there could be a lot of skin potential for both of these characters. I think the real standout character that people would like to see from Resident Evil 7, of course as a killer, is Jack Baker. So I've created a little concept for each potential killer for a Resident Evil Part 3. It's not too in depth, but it's just to give us all an idea for what this character could play like in DBD, what powers they could have and things like that. So yeah, starting with Jack Baker.
Welcome to the family, son.
Killer. The father. Killer power, mold enhancement. Jack's bond with the mold grants him immense durability and strength. Hold down the power button to enter unstoppable mode. In this mode, Jack moves in a fast, confident stride that gives him a powerful radius. Unstoppable gives him haste, and it will also vault windows quickly. If a pallet is dropped on him in this mode, the pallet will be destroyed, but take him out of his power. Survivors caught in the radius of Unstoppable's scream and are revealed by Killer Instinct. This charges up Jack's secondary power. Secondary power, Chainsaw. When charged, Jack gains access to his chainsaw shears. Press the secondary power button to access your chainsaw. Survivors hit with this weapon will inflict double damage. This will also destroy downed pallets and breakable walls too. If the killer is stunned while in this mode, the power is cancelled. Here are a list of cosmetics for Jack, including weapons. So again, these concepts are fairly rough, but I like the idea that because Jack in RE7 is basically indestructible, but he doesn't really have any sort of projectiles or anything like that. So the idea of him just basically being so powerful that he can just like tank being palleted, and anyone who gets near him basically gets injured. Made sense to me. Of course, Ethan's infamous boss fight with Jack where he has the sort of chainsaw shears, I thought, that was such an iconic weapon that it had to be incorporated somehow into his power. That being said, there are plenty of other characters in Resident Evil 7 that would also fit the killer role quite well too.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead.
Killer Marguerite Baker, the Swarm. Killer power Hive Mother. Marguerite's bond with the mold has increased her bond with her beloved insects to a frightening degree. Hold down the power button to shift to insect mode. In this form, Marguerite's limbs become elongated and she is able to traverse walls and ceilings with ease. While in this mode, press and hold the attack button to charge a lunge attack. Secondary power Swarm. Press and hold the secondary power button to charge up a swarm of insects. This swarm can then be launched to cover an area, swarming survivors with bugs. Survivors must perform a repelling action to get rid of the bugs. If they are hit by a second swarm, the survivors will be put into deep wound. Cosmetics. Again inspired by Marguerite's appearance in Resident Evil 7, I like the idea of a killer that can actually traverse the environment in a unique way. I don't think we've seen a killer that can sort of crawl around on the walls or even on the ceiling. I don't know if that would even be possible for them to create a killer like that, but it would definitely be very unique. And of course she uses insects as well, so having them sort of be a kind of a projectile, kind of like artist's birds, sort of fit with her character too. Again, she's probably not as iconic as Jack. I actually think she might be a bit scarier though, and I remember her scaring the absolute hell out of me in Resident Evil 7. She doesn't really have much in terms of like skins or cosmetics, but I'm sure that if it ever happened that they would come up with some interesting ideas.
This is your fault.
Killer Eveline, the Mold. Killer power Mold Blast. Eveline was developed to take advantage of the mold, making her a deadly bioweapon with incredible powers. Hold down the power button to charge up your Mold Blast. Release the power button and Eveline will send a blast of energy in front of her. Survivors hit by this are infected with mold. Infected survivors can infect others by interacting with them on generators or hooks. When infected, survivors become hindered and allow Eveline to use her secondary power. Secondary power Psychosis. Hold down the secondary power button to charge Psychosis. Hitting an infected survivor with this will injure them and cause them to see hallucinations. Special interaction Hallucinations. Survivors hit with Psychosis will see projections of Eveline. Running through these will cause the survivor to scream and become hindered. The longer survivors remain in this mode, the more hallucinations they will see. Special item Type E Serum. Located in supply cases, survivors can unlock these and use the E Serum to cure themselves of the infection. Cosmetics. So this concept for Eveline really sort of connects her with the Resident Evil killers we already have in Dead by Daylight, like Wesker and Nemesis. The idea that she can infect survivors with her mold and it causes them to hallucinate. And also the fact that there's a special item that can cure that infection. It would sort of be in line with what we've already got. Maybe it'd be a bit too similar, but because it's mold, it'd be slightly different. Also, we've not really had a killer that was like a younger character. I know they said they wouldn't have survivors that were younger, which makes sense, but having a killer work that way would be kind of interesting. And technically, Eveline is sort of the main villain, I think, of Resident Evil 7. She's delightfully creepy, so she would fit quite well, I think. The only character I've really sort of left out is Lucas, but Lucas is kind of more like, this sort of trap master, like sort of jigsaw type character, so I don't really see him being a full-on killer himself. Perhaps a legendary skin, maybe we'll look at that later on. So let's move on to the sequel to Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil Village. Ethan Winters returns as the protagonist for Resident Evil Village, as does Mia. So survivors are kind of all covered here. The only additional one I could think of would be Rosemary Winters, so their daughter. who we see all grown up in the DLC expansion. There are a few other characters as well that could fit this role, but I think we'll do a legendary section at the end to cover all sort of legendary skins for both Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. Of course, the main focus of this game and the reason why so many people were drawn to it is of course Lady Dimitrescu. I think in terms of Resident Evil killers, she's definitely the biggest rival to Jack Baker. Of course, she's immensely popular and she's been in lots of crossover media, so seeing her in Dead by Daylight would be a real treat for a lot of the Resident Evil fans, and I think most of the internet as well.
On your knees!
Killer, Lady Dimitrescu, the noblewoman. Killer power, bloodlust. Alcina lives for the thrill of the hunt, quenching her hunger with the blood of her enemies. Injuring survivors gives Lady D access to her bloodlust. When the meter is full, use the power button to activate bloodlust mode. In this mode, her speed and attack range are increased for a short time. Special interaction, height. Alcina's incredible height makes her an intimidating presence, but can also be a hindrance. Lady D will crouch between doorways. Special power, daughters. Lady D's loving daughters accompany their mother during the trials. Press the secondary power button to summon a daughter. Baylor, Cassandra or Daniela can then be controlled by the player. They move at a quicker pace and can down survivors. If they hook a survivor, control is reverted back to Lady D. Lady D can block off windows and doorways while controlling the daughters. Cosmetics. So this concept for Lady D as a killer is sort of like a mix between the Oni and the Knight, where injuring survivors allows her to charge up her bloodlust that then enhances her strength during the trials. And then also having her daughters as a controllable character that you can then chase people with, so maybe there's a bit of twins thrown in there as for good measure. There's been a lot of talk that if she was added, how would they factor in the height? I think with Nemesis they did shrink him down a bit, so I don't know if they do the same for her. I also think like there'd have to be a balance there, because if she was slowed down by going through doorways, then any sort of indoor maps would basically make her unplayable, but that's why I incorporated the daughters as well, just so there's a kind of balance there. We can actually see this in the Mercenaries mode in Resident Evil Village, how she has to crouch between doorways, but she can also summon her daughters who basically act as little sort of NPC characters that fight on your behalf. So the combination of both I think would be the answer if they're going to keep the height as a sort of hindrance to her playstyle. I think she would definitely work as a killer, and there's quite a lot of potential with her. I mean, she's got some killer voice lines, and especially incorporating her daughters, who are just as popular, I think, as her, would be a real treat for any Resident Evil Village fan. That being said, I think the daughters as well could serve as their own killers, so let's move on to them now.
Man blood.
Killer, Baylor, Cassandra and Daniela, the daughters. Killer power, entomphobia. The three wicked Dimitrescu daughters hunt as a trio. Baylor leads the sisters, using her fly swarm to confuse prey. Cassandra the hunter races forward in a deadly swarm to catch her victims. Daniela likes to play with her food, using her flies to trap it. Press the secondary power button to switch between three forms. Swarm, Baylor, will create a radius of flies around the daughters, ensnaring any survivors. They must perform the repel action to get rid of them. Continued exposure injures survivors. Stream, Cassandra. Rush forward as a stream of flies, a dash ability that allows the daughters to fly over pallets and windows. Survivors caught in the stream scream and are revealed by killer instinct. Block, Daniela. Highlight a window or pallet. Summon a cloud of flies that block it off. Cosmetics. The idea for the daughters is that there's three different powers or three different abilities. and that you sort of swap between each sister for each one. So the Swarm is Baylor, the Stream is Cassandra, and the Block is Daniela. So it'd be like 3 characters in one, which I don't know if they've ever really done. Realistically, it'd probably be more like a sort of Legion situation where you just play as Baylor or Cassandra, and there's like 3 separate slots for those characters, although each of them are basically identical with the exception of the face, and I think the choker is a different colour for each sister, so there's definitely a lot of versatility here with their powers. It'd be kind of like a mixture of artist and maybe even Vecna to some extent. That being said, we've still got some colourful villains to look at in Resident Evil Village for killers in Dead by Daylight.
Don't leave. I can't let you.
Killer, Donna Beneviento, the Doll Maker. Killer power, playful puppetry. The Doll Maker is a quiet and mysterious figure whose hidden powers are deceptively deadly. Donna uses pollen from yellow flowers to cause hallucinations in her victims. She also has mastery of her dolls, making her deadly playmates threats to the survivors. Hold down the power button to create a cloud of yellow flower pollen. Survivors who are caught in this become infected. Secondary power, hide and seek. When survivors are infected, Donna gains access to hide and seek. Hold the secondary power button to cloak, with only Angie visible. Donna receives a speed boost during this mode. Special object, dolls. Survivors can interact with dolls placed around the map. If they solve the doll, they will cure their infection. However, this then gives Donna access to a new ability. Special ability, doll control. Approach an infected doll and press the interact button. The doll can then be controlled for a short time and can injure survivors. They will be destroyed when landing a successful attack. Cosmetics. So Donna's quite an interesting character in Village because she's sort of the only boss that you don't directly have a fight with. It's almost like a game of hide and seek. She prefers to sort of remain hidden and interact with people with her dolls. The idea here was that even her weapon, using Angie as a weapon, she's not really actually hitting you with a knife or anything. It's like using her puppetry to attack you. Incorporating the hallucinations with the yellow flowers, and then also being able to move the dolls around separately would be, she'd kind of be like a mixture of the Plague and Chucky perhaps. This concept is quite complicated, but I think it really pays sort of respect to her appearance in Village and the different abilities she has in that game.
You're stupid.
Killer, Salvatore Moreau. The Amphibian. Power, aquatic acid. Moreau, a twisted being of flesh, is the master of the waters. His mutation is unstable, but allows him to spew acid to harm survivors. Press the secondary power button to cycle through several abilities. Acid Shot. Shoots a blob of acid that harms a survivor. Creates a puddle of acid that will inflict deep wound if a survivor runs over it. Acid Rain. Charge up the attack and set a mass of acid raining down on an area of the map. Survivors caught in it for too long are injured. Acid Blob. Create an acidic blob to block off an area. Survivors can walk through it, but it will slow them down for a short time. Cosmetics. Poor simple Moreau, he's not too complicated in this concept. The idea is that he has different ways of shooting acid at the survivors, kind of akin to his boss fight in Resident Evil Village, although in that form he's like a giant fish creature. I don't think we could have a giant fish creature in Dead by Daylight, sadly, so it would have to be his more sort of human form. But the idea of like being able to sort of control areas of the map by creating these sort of acid puddles that would injure survivors or even blocking off certain paths would be quite an interesting concept.
Showtime!
Killer, Carl Heisenberg, the Engineer. Power, magnetism. Heisenberg is the master of metal, crafting monsters and machines alike. His unique biology grants him access to magnetism and control over metal itself. Hold down the power button to charge up a metal projectile. Use the projectile to attach to survivors. Hold down the secondary power button to create a magnetic field around Heisenberg. While in this mode, use the power button to pull metal towards you, including survivors. Special ability, Charge Attack. When enough survivors have been injured through your power, you can unleash a charged electrical slam with your hammer, causing a shockwave that makes nearby survivors scream and afflicts them with metal. Cosmetics. So like Lady Dimitrescu, Heisenberg is playable in Resident Evil Village Mercenaries mode, and this kind of killer concept was inspired by what he can do in that game. So he can like shoot bits of metal at people that injure them, but the idea is that he would shoot metal at the survivors, they would basically become magnetic, and then his secondary power would be able to pull them towards him. When he sort of hit enough people through that, he then has this charge attack, which would be the sort of massive shockwave ability that can afflict anyone nearby. Kind of like the Doctor's power in a sense.
Impudent!
Killer. Mother Miranda. The Mother. Power. Prophet of the Black God. Miranda controls the mold, granting her vast powers and mutations. Hold down the secondary power button and use the directional buttons to swap between abilities. 1. Flight. Miranda flies for a short time. 2. Spider form. Miranda uses spider legs to climb over low walls and pallets quicker. Survivors caught in the rush are injured. 3. Megamycete. Summon branches of the Megamycete to block off areas. 4. Prayer. A prayer to the Black God charges up your power, allowing you to cycle through your abilities quicker. Cosmetics. The concept for Mother Miranda is essentially Resident Evil's version of Vecna. She had all these different powers, like being able to fly across the map would be her dash. The spider form would be this kind of ability where she can vault things quickly in it, and also it would injure anyone nearby. Using sort of Megamycete branches, she would be able to block off areas to sort of lock down survivors. Having a additional ability, a prayer, that can then allow her powers to be charged quicker, I think would be kind of nice. I don't think we've really seen a character like that in Dead by Daylight, where they sort of have to buff themselves in a way. This last section is dedicated to all the legendary skins we could get from Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. So for RE7 we could have legendary skins of Joe Baker and Zoe Baker, of course. For Resident Evil Village we have characters like Elena or Louisa from the Village, or maybe even Chris's Alpha team could be made into legendaries. There's also plenty of sort of characters and monsters that could fit as legendary skins for other killers. This is a rushdown of all the killers I've just spoke about and where they could fit if they were legendary skins. Jack would work as a great skin for the Hillbilly. I think Marguerite could fit as the Unknown. Lady Dimitrescu could work as the Knight, with her daughters being summonable instead of his guards. But the daughters also could be a skin for the Nurse. I think that would fit quite well. Donna could maybe work as the twins. I'm not sure how you'd have to try and change Victor into Angie somehow. Heisenberg as the Doctor, I think that would be an excellent fit. And then Miranda as the artist. Again, with the whole bird motif, I think that would fit pretty seamlessly. There's lots of other creatures as well, particularly in Village. Things like Urias could be a cool skin for someone, maybe for the Oni. And that about wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've watched. This video is really fun to make. I love Resident Evil, and although I do think other chapters are more deserving of a sequel chapter in Dead by Daylight, I wouldn't complain if it was the third Resident Evil one in January. Personally, I think Jack Baker and Lady D are probably the top contenders. That being said, if I could pick any, I probably would pick Miranda. I think she could be essentially the Resident Evil equivalent of Vecna, and could have a lot of versatility with her abilities, but almost all of these could work quite well. I mean, Donna, maybe even the Daughters too would be a nice fit. Hopefully I'll be back with more content like this soon. There's quite a lot of other areas in the Resident Evil universe that we could look at for another chapter, so maybe that'll be the next video I work on. As well as YouTube, I also stream on Twitch. You can find me there at the 13th Elysium. We play all sorts of games, including Dead by Daylight, so I'd love to see you over there. Thank you so much for watching again, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.